Hello everyone, I'm Mariana, this is Impression Blend, and today I am back with more underrated and underwatched movie recommendations for you because we're only halfway through the year and a lot of you are already missing out. All of these are from this year, 2026 US releases. All of them have something interesting to offer. It's a mix of sci-fi, horror, and thrillers, all of the things that we love on this channel. So let's get into it and talk about some great recent movies that you should definitely watch. First up is Faces of Death, and yes, that is a reimagining of the 1978 film under the same title. There is an entire old franchise of these which I have never seen because it never sounded very appealing to me, so I wasn't really expecting much from this reimagining, but I was pleasantly surprised. The movie is about Margot, who is a content moderator on a video platform. She comes across a series of very violent videos that seem to be recreating the death scenes from the original Faces of Death film. Yes, we are getting meta here. And she begins to suspect that they are not staged, but actually real. Now, because there is a meta aspect to this story, you might be wondering if you need to watch the original for this to work. You don't. The way they wrote it into the plot gives you all of the information you need, and it works really well as a standalone. Honestly, this is what the Scream reboot trilogy should have been like instead of the mess they ended up with. There is a solid story here, which is not something I expected based on what I've heard about the original. The story is equal parts horror, thriller, and mystery. The main character is flawed but compelling. They're bringing social media commentary into the mix because murder is content in this case. And even though I did expect it to be a bit more gory and gruesome, it still does plenty in that department. Also, Doc Ray Montgomery is convincingly freaky in the best way, and having a great villain is huge for a film like this. Some suspension of disbelief is definitely required. Faces of Death is not perfect, but I feel like barely anyone saw this movie, either because it wasn't advertised very well or because they dismissed it based on the premise, and that's a shame because there is so much fun to be had here if you're a horror fan. Underrated and underwatched, very much so. Next up is Heel, also known as Good Boy. Weird titles, I know. This movie is strange and psychological, leaning a little bit more into the mystery thriller genre than into horror, but would still fall under the general umbrella of psychological horror. Definitely a film that's going to have you questioning what in the world is going on here. Tommy is a volatile 19-year-old. His life revolves around violence and partying hard, which he loves sharing on social media and feels no remorse. One night, while he's on a bender, he gets separated from his friends and is abducted by some mysterious figure. When he wakes up, he has no idea where he is or why he is imprisoned in some random family's basement. Let me just say this. Heel is not a movie for people who need a clear protagonist or a clearly likable character. It's not that kind of movie. There's something very Yorgos Lanthimos about this one, and not the mainstream fun Yorgos, but the weird and bleak Yorgos. The setup sounds like a pretty straightforward thriller, but as the movie slowly unfolds its layers, everything becomes more complicated. It makes you sit with some very uncomfortable things. It becomes more and more unsettling as you get further in, and at certain points, it even had me thinking back to A Clockwork Orange. Great performances across the board, great atmosphere and tone, very, very creepy. It's a bit of a slow burn, but the payoff is so worth it, and the ending is incredibly chilling. I needed to process for a while after finishing Heel, and I'm still wrestling with some of the ideas in this movie. It's the perfect film for those of you who enjoy seeing the darkest corners of humanity explored on screen thoroughly. It's simultaneously uncomfortable, fascinating and upsetting, but it's also odd and definitely unforgettable. Let's move on to some indie sci-fi, because what's better than a revenge thriller? A multiverse revenge thriller, and that is Redux Redux. It's dark, it's intense, the multiverse aspect is actually used very well, and I cannot believe I haven't heard anyone talk about this gem. Irene is a woman who lost her daughter and is now using a machine to travel through parallel universes and hunt down her daughter's killer. Talk about being hellbent on revenge. She has hunted him down many times. She kills him in every universe until one time, something changes her trajectory, and yes, this little indie movie absolutely pulls off this sci-fi concept. I don't want to tell you anything else about the story or reveal any plot details, because if that premise doesn't grab your attention, I don't know what will, but at the end of the day, it's a character study of someone losing their humanity on their endless quest for revenge. Can someone like that find satisfaction? Can someone like that find redemption? It's a movie that works as a revenge thriller because it is action-packed and it does have a character with a very clear motive, but what makes it interesting is what this cycle of violence does to Irene. You don't get the sense that she's finding what she's looking for in those parallel universes, and yet it feels like she doesn't exist outside of this cycle. Michaela McManus is perfect as Irene, portraying her with all of the emotion, anger, pain, and depth this character needs. I actually like that this movie is not overly concerned with the rules of its sci-fi element. It gives you enough to accept that this is part of the story and that it somehow works, but it's also not the point. Redux Redux is emotional, dark, and impactful. The point is whether or not there is a chance at a different life for someone like Irene, and what would it take for her to see herself as a real person again. Finally, I have a very special hidden gem for you. You Are the Universe, which is a Ukrainian sci-fi film. The Kosmos in Ukrainian. This one had a very odd release. It started doing the festival rounds in 2024, continued in 2025, then got released in some countries in the second half of 2025, and only got this quiet VOD release that nobody heard about in the US this year in 2026. Which is a shame because I would have loved to see this movie on the big screen. But my point is that I think that is why people have pretty much no idea this movie even exists, and they should, because it's great. A Ukrainian astronaut, Andriy, is by himself with an onboard AI assistant on a mission for a nuclear waste disposal company. One day, he sees the Earth essentially explode, and now Andriy thinks he's the last person alive until he receives a transmission from a French astronaut near Saturn. Naturally, with nothing left to lose and despite any obstacles in his way, Andriy decides to travel to meet her. I don't know what exactly I was expecting going into this film, but based on the premise, I had some sort of general idea about what this movie was going to be like. Well, I was wrong, and this turned out to be not at all what I expected, and so much better than I could have imagined. The two films that come to mind here as comparison are Moon and Aniara, another very underrated sci-fi movie. I've talked about it before, but this is a thematic comparison. Do not make assumptions about the plot based on those two movies. However, if you enjoyed these two, I think you are very likely to enjoy You Are the Universe. At its core, like all of the best sci-fi, it's a film about humanity. It's a story about who we are after we lose everything, about hope, about loneliness. You can feel the influence of big sci-fi classics here, but it's an original story that never feels derivative. Also, Volodymyr Kravchuk's lead performance is wonderfully nuanced and emotional. It's impossible not to root for him. The best way I can describe the experience of You Are the Universe is to say that this is a painfully beautiful film. It very much got to me. It's impactful, it's heartfelt, it looks gorgeous. I laughed, I cried, I was stressed. It's an absolute must watch, and it's definitely one of my favorite movies of this year so far. But let me know what recent movies you think are flying under the radar at the moment. I cannot wait to see your recommendations in the comments below, and I will see you very soon in my next video. Bye!